Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Questions and Answers. Today is Sunday, December the 16th. We've got a boatload of stuff that you guys have been asking over the last week, so we want to try and get to as many as possible. Just remember, if you don't see or don't hear me answer some of your questions, that probably means that the questions have already been asked before and answered on previous shows, or in some instances, the question that you're asking is probably entails like answers that are so massive that they deserve a show of their own. So in some instances, I'll point those out. But there have been some really good ones, and a couple of them I've been kind of like scratching my head saying, I could probably do an entire show on that, let alone a quick little answer on a format like this. So let's dive right into it. So the first question today is from Tate Davis. What's up, Tate? Great video as always. Nazareth has done a great deal of cool covers throughout their career. Ironically, I'm wearing a Nazareth shirt today. I didn't plan that. Like Beggar's Day, Tush, and This Flight Tonight. What is your favorite of these covers? Thanks so much for answering my questions. I would say, at least out of those three, I think I like Beggar's Day the best. Of course, that's an old Nils Lofgren tune. I think they did a fantastic job with Beggar's Day. It's pretty upbeat, pretty exciting. Tush I kind of like. It's not one of my favorites of theirs. Of course, you know Love Hurts as a cover as well. This Flight Tonight is very good. I actually like the live version of that the best, but that's a good one too. But yeah, I think Beggar's Day gets the nod for me here. All right, next question from Alex Hamilton. Loving these shows. So many different topics. Thank you, Alex. What do you think of Rare Bird? Also, have you ever heard Silent Dance by the 80s prog band Solstice? You know, I don't think I have ever heard anything by Solstice. I know they were one of those kind of like lesser known of the, I believe they were from the UK, prog bands that came out right around the same time as Marillion IQ, Pendragon, so on and so forth. I don't think I have heard Silent Dance to my knowledge. I know I definitely don't own it. I'm not sure if I've ever heard it. It does not really, I always have heard the name Solstice. I don't know if I've ever actually listened to them. As far as Rare Bird goes, good band. The only one I own is the As Your Mind Flies By album, which I think is very, very good. Very underrated band. Good kind of like obscure band from the 70s. From our buddy Alan Joyce. Hey there, Pete. I have a few questions for you. Is there any one song, instrumental track, or passage of music that makes you cry or get overly emotional every time you hear it? That's a great question. Alan says, with me, it's Rainbow's Stargazer, mainly due to Ronnie's vocal and the orchestral backing. Secondly, when you first discovered hard rock metal, how did it make you feel? In other words, did you feel empowered, proud, more hopeful in general, more open-minded, etc.? And lastly, if somewhat morbidly, do you have a favorite song that you'd like played at your funeral? Oof. Yeah. Let's tackle your first question. As far as a song that kind of gets me emotionally, I would say, I mean, you named mine. I listen to Stargazer, and I instantly tear up and get emotional. It's just for me, and it's always been one of my favorite songs of all time. But I think since Ronnie's passing, it's even made more of an impact on me. I mean, I try very hard. There are times where I'll give you a perfect example. Like I'm working at the gym, and I want to listen to Rainbow Rising. And then Stargazer comes on, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like working out, and I'm just like, I'm tearing up, and I'm just so into it. I'm like, oh man, I would say Stargazer definitely. There are times where Child in Time makes me feel that way by Deep Purple. Still of the Night, definitely, by Whitesnake. I have a real long attachment to that song. That's probably, in fact, those three songs are probably my top three songs of all time. Just no surprise there. Empty Rooms by Gary Moore kind of does it to me as well, especially that solo. Especially there's like a live version of the Empty Rooms, of him playing Empty Rooms live in Europe from 1987. It's got an extended guitar solo. Man, I just watch him do that on YouTube, and I'm just like, just miss that guy so much. As far as the second part of your question, when I first discovered hard rock and metal, how did it make you feel? I mean, it was new and exciting, and it was like a new lease on life for me. I don't think I felt empowered or proud. I just, it felt like being a part of a community. I think most folks who, metalheads, whatever you want to call us, I think that we all feel that we're part of this big family. And I think once I started discovering, Kiss was the first dive into heavy music, but then it was like Sabbath and Purple and Zeppelin and Scorpions and Rainbow and Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, and all of a sudden you felt like you were part of something. I think that's kind of how it worked with me. What would I like played at my funeral? Jesus, I don't know. That's a great question. Probably any of those tunes. I would think I'd love to hear Stargazer at my funeral. Well, I wouldn't be hearing it actually, but I think that if I would be like, you got to play that song. It's just so majestic and so powerful. It's like, I think that would be a good choice. I think Child of Time would be a little downbeat for a funeral, but I think Stargazer would work. Good questions. From Miguel Oliveira. Congratulations on the channel and the various shows. They are all great. My question is, what do you think about Pavlov's Dog? In my opinion, one of the most underrated bands of the 70s. I got to be honest with you, I have never listened to Pavlov's Dog. Sorry. I'll have to go check them out, though. From Nick's Texans fan number 1. Thanks for answering my previous question. I won't ask any more Hall of Fame questions. Good. What is one concert venue that is on your bucket list that you haven't been to yet? Well, as far as like here in the States, I've been to probably, well, I've been to everything here in the New York area. I think most of the more historic concert venues in the States are in New York, and I've been to all of them. I would say in the entire world, I still to this day would love to go to the Royal Albert Hall in London, as well as the Hammersmith Odeon. So I'll put both of them up there. I think if I ever go to the UK or go to London specifically, I would like to go see a show at one of those two places. So, from the Lax, hey Pete, what bands in your opinion have never released a bad album? I can think of a few off the top of my head, like Opeth, Haken, Porcupine Tree, the Mars Volta, possibly the Flower Kings. It just seems to me that every great band has at least one or two Never Say Dies or Hold Your Fires. There's probably so many, but off the top of my head, I would say progressive metal act Seventh Wonder. What a catalog they have. Not a bad one. Symphony X. In my opinion, Symphony X has never released a dud, ever. I think Saxon, up there pretty well, too, have not released any bad albums, any weak albums. So there's 3 for you right there. There's probably a lot more. That's probably grounds for an entire show. Bands that have not released a bad album. I'm going to consider doing that. The Lax has a second question. How would you define a bad album, or what goes into the making of a bad album? Simply changing the style or genre of music can definitely be annoying, although I would argue that doesn't necessarily equal poor quality. Maybe a questionable drop in dynamic and or composition, perhaps bad band chemistry, or the constant replacement of members causing a loss of focus. How about losing the passion, only releasing music for the money? I'm sure there's a lot more to add. I mean, yeah, a lot of those factor into it. I think, bad songwriting is one, because I've heard a lot of really, really good bands release bad albums where the just songwriting's not there. Maybe the album was rushed out, and the songs just, there's a lack of focus. I think, too, you bring up a good point. There are some bands who change members all the time, and it's just like kind of like every album is just like a mishmash of different songwriting. And so there's, some bad production, too, can factor in. I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, I remember when Rush released Vapor Trails, I was kind of like, this is just not a very good album, not very memorable. It sounds like shit. But then they remixed that album a couple years later, and all of a sudden it's like it's a new album. It's like, oh, this is actually not too bad. So a lot of things that can go into that. And I think the money situation too. It's like, oh, let's just get back together and for a cash grab and release an album. And again, it sounds like crap because it's just there's no fire and passion into it, no emotion. So a lot of factors. From Kitten Care. Any love for John Hassel? Have you ever used any cataloging software for your CDs like Collectors from collectors.com? I am not familiar with John Hassel. Sorry. As far as cataloging software, yeah, I originally had, back before I started using Mac, like Apple laptops, I had some PCs. I believe I had a Dell at the time, and my sister-in-law actually bought me a subscription to Collectors, which I started cataloging movies and CDs. But lo and behold, of course, that the hard drive on that computer died. With it went my Collectors, and I switched over to Mac and haven't looked into it since. So, but at this point, to start over again with all that I have, but that would be quite the undertaking. Another question from Kitten Care. Any favorite Christmas albums? Oh, yeah, hell yeah. I think the Vince Guaraldi trio, the Charlie Brown Christmas, probably top of the list. Love that. Jolly Christmas from Frank Sinatra. Trans-Siberian Orchestra's Christmas Eve and Other Stories is probably also at the top of my list. Bing Crosby's White Christmas I love a lot. Dean Martin Christmas album. I'm a big Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra fan. The Brian Setzer Orchestra, the Christmas release that they put out. That's very good. And I like the Chicago Christmas, the band Chicago. So I have a lot. I'm big into Christmas music. I have a ton of Christmas albums. And of course, and we mentioned this last week, I love the Jethro Tull Christmas album quite a bit. From Simplicissimus. Question out of the left wing. What did you like before you had any control over what you listened to? For instance, my father brought home Switched on Bach and Well-Tempered Synthesizer by Walter Carlos, Mendelssohn, Beethoven 7th, and he took me to see Dizzy Gillespie, Lionel Hampton, Oscar Peterson, and Duke Ellington's orchestra after the Duke had died. Then there's Count Basie, Getz, blah, 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 blah. Then my brother picked up on Floyd's A Nice Pair and hooked it up on Ancient Oscilloscope. It was all over then. From these twisted origins, I ended up a prog head. What about you? How about you? Initially, I grew up in a house where my father really liked my father never listened to a lot of music, but he liked the Beatles a lot, and he liked his family's from Spain, so he liked some Spanish music and Brazilian music. And my mom was into like the crooners and stuff, so I grew up listening hearing Johnny Mathis and Barry Manilow and Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck. That's kind of what my mom liked. They liked old time rock and roll from the 50s and early 60s. So that's what I kind of grew up with. And then I started to get into like AM pop hits because my parents like to listen to the radio a lot, so I got kind of caught up in that whole thing. But it wasn't until I actually my parents had a couple that they were very good friends with, and their daughter was a few years older than me. And I remember we went over there for dinner one weekend, and their daughter was playing the Destroyer album. Actually, no, it was a Kiss Alive. Was it Kiss Alive or Destroy? I don't remember exactly. And I had never heard Kiss before, and I was kind of like, wow, what is this? And I immediately put together my allowance money and went out and bought the Destroyer album, and that was it for me. So that kind of started my whole journey. So yeah, that's how it all began. From Walter Zimmerman. If you were a baseball player, what would be your intro song before going to bat? Mine would be Iron Maiden's Be Quick or Be Dead. That's a great question. I think Burn by Deep Purple. I just think that's one of my all-time favorite riffs, and I think that would be a great song to kind of walk up out of the batter's box and get up to the plate with. So Burn by Deep Purple. From Casa Valerianus Ostis, however you say your name, Honestus. Okay, Pete, first off, let's say thanks for your words about Suzi Quatro. You're welcome. I dig her chops. Now I'm listening to Iced Earth's Gettysburg Trilogy. I'm not familiar with this band, but I like what I'm hearing so far. What do you know about them? I've been following Iced Earth for a long, long time. I think they're a great band, and they've got like a bunch of different eras because they've had a bunch of different singers. You really can't go wrong with any of it. So you're listening to the Gettysburg Trilogy albums, I would say if you want a good cross-selection of a lot of their best songs, especially from the first part of their career, go and pick up the Alive in Athens triple live album. It's fantastic. But yeah, you can't go wrong. I love the newer stuff. Okay, with Stu on vocals. The Ripper stuff is great, and of course, you got the classic stuff. So a great band. Another one of those bands that probably has not released a bad album. So I think you cannot go wrong with any of their albums. Start from the beginning and work your way down. It's all good. From Luis Roberto, what is your opinion about From Genesis to Revelation? Do you like the album? I think it was that album that most had different covers. Incredible. I'm not a huge fan. I love Genesis. I'm not crazy about the From Genesis to Revelation album. It's okay. There's some good stuff on there. I think it's just a band that had not found their way yet. It's kind of folky and early psychedelia and a bit of pop. It's okay. And yeah, I think that I remember seeing, when I first started getting to Genesis, I remember seeing so many different LPs of that with different album covers. I think one had which I almost bought. It had like Gabriel with the hogweed costume on the front. And I was like, whoa, look at that. But then obviously that was a later reissue. That wasn't the original album cover. So I don't dislike it. I don't love it. And then the next part of Lewis's question is, do you consider Trespass an Unjustified album or a little admiration? I love the album. I think the fans speak little of it, sadly. And you know what? A lot of really hardcore Genesis fans really do love that album, as I do. I think it's a great album. That is an album of a band that is just starting to hit their stride. And I think about half of that album really is Genesis as they would become, over the course of the next couple albums. But I think it's a pretty strong album, top to bottom. Definitely leagues better than the From Genesis to Revelation, in my opinion. So I dig Trespass. From L. Franklin. Hi, Pete. I really enjoy your videos and website. 2 questions. Can you recommend a couple of hard psych / hard rock from the very late 60s and early 70s? Have you thought about trying to create a radio station on your website? No clue how any of that works, but it'd be fun to hear a mix of tunes that we could then check out. Excuse me. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to tackle your second question first. I have been asked numerous times by people that I know, and I've thought about like what it would entail to set up like an internet like radio station type of thing, playing the stuff that I'm into. I'd have to look into it and see what it would entail, because I think that would be pretty damn cool. And it would really give me a chance to play a lot of really like obscure stuff. I don't know how the copyrights and all that kind of stuff works, but I would have to check into that, because I think it'd be a lot of fun. Back to the first part of your question, obscure hard rock and psych from the 60s and 70s. Man, how much time we got? I'm going to throw some names at you. A lot of these bands here that I'm going to mention kind of bridge the gap between psych, prog, and hard rock. There's so many. If you haven't seen it, go check out my top hard rock and metal bands from the underground. Okay, and I think you'll find a lot of cool stuff there. I went through a boatload of them, so go into the playlist and check out like the history of playlist, and you'll find some really cool stuff in there. But I'll throw some out at you here. Aunt Mary from Norway, Asterix, which was kind of like the pre-Lucifer's Friend band. In fact, check out Lucifer Friend too if you haven't checked them out. Glass Harp, another cool band, kind of like a Christian psych prog hard rock band. Birth Control from Germany. Poobah from here in the U.S. Very cool kind of psych acid rock, hard rock band. Kind of early stoner band, actually. Damnation of Adam Blessing. Very cool late 60s, early 70s psych band. Dragonfly. Euclid from Euclid, Ohio. Very cool hard psych band. Dust from New York. Fields. Flax, like flaxseed. Flied Egg, another very cool band. Steel Mill, okay, not the Bruce Springsteen band, Steel Mill. And Stray, another really good band, Stray. Check out a bunch of those. There's a ton more, man, but those are some that I kind of came up with pretty quick. From Earl Joy, hey Pete, there are several great British bands that are unheard of on this side of the pond. You've mentioned several. Stone the Crows, man, Wishbone Ash. My favorite was The Move, who morphed into ELO. Are you familiar with them, and what's your opinion? Yeah, I dig The Move. I think, that first album, and Shazam, is very good. I like Shazam a lot. Looking On and Message from the Country, I believe those were their 4 albums. They were all really good. And in fact, if you're someone who is familiar with those first 2 Electric Light Orchestra albums, I think you'd dig The Move. Very good. Very kind of Beatles-ish in spots, kind of very psychedelic. A lot of cool, like, kind of British pop going on in there, too. It's a really, really interesting band. As far as the other ones you mentioned, Stone the Crows, I love. Man is pretty cool. I've talked about them before. Wishbone Ash, of course, I'm very familiar with. You mentioned the Edgar Broughton band. I like them. I have a, the Harvest Years box set, which I kind of dig. It's got a lot of material on it from their Harvest era when they were on the Harvest label. My one issue with the Edgar Broughton band is that his vocals are a little on the rough side. He's kind of got this Captain Beefheart thing going on vocals, which at times I'm kind of like, ugh. But, musically it's pretty cool stuff. You mentioned the band Wizard. That's Roy Wood's band. I actually do not have that Wizard's Brew album, which I need to get because everybody loves that. I've heard good things about it. You also mentioned Barclay James Harvest. That's a fantastic band. Much, much better than the kind of poor man's moody blues that they always got tagged with. They've got some great albums. If you've never listened to Barclay James Harvest, check out Everyone Is Everybody Else. Time Honored Ghost is great. Gone to Earth is great. Baby James Harvest is a pretty strong album. And also the October Run. The self-titled Barclay James Harvest album is very good. And their live album, I think that was from 74, is fantastic. If you love the Mellotron and stinging guitar leads, man, woo, check that album out. That live album out, that's some great album, man, I tell you. From Alex L. I consider Uriah Heep's Living the Dream very, very good album. That's the newest one for those of you who have not heard it. One of Uriah Heep's best of all time, not just in recent times, but including the Byron era as well. That's a pretty strong opinion there. Can't say I disagree there. And not a masterpiece is Look at Yourself, but better than High and Mighty and equal to Sweet Freedom or Wonderworld. In my personal opinion, of course. My theory is this: if Living the Dream was released in earlier mid-70s, it would be considered as one of Uriah Heep's best albums. On the other hand, if any new, totally unknown band released Living the Dream album in 2018, for example, if we take off Uriah Heep's label from the cover, it would be considered as one of the year's best albums, and it would be a bestseller to go #1 on all charts. What do you think? Agree or disagree? Well, I'm not going to, I don't know if it'll go #1 on all charts if you just took the Uriah Heep name off that. I think the Uriah Heep name carries a lot of weight, and I think that the Living the Dream album has gotten a lot of very, very positive press and acclaim from fans and critics alike. So, but I just, this style of music is not going to be #1 selling in any country, regardless of whether it says Uriah Heep on it or not. I will agree with you absolutely that I think it's an extremely strong album. It's ranking very, very high on my end of the year to best of 2018 list. And yeah, it's definitely, I'm of the opinion that the last 4 Uriah Heep studio albums are as good as anything they've ever released. I think definitely it's probably better than their 80s stuff, definitely better than their 90s stuff, and ranks right up there with some of the best stuff that they've released in the early mid-70s. So I'm in agree with you there. I think it's a damn good album. All right, from Lucius Blackwood. If a band you like puts out a live Blu-ray/DVD and corresponding CD, do you feel the need to get the CD even if you picked up the Blu-ray? Lucius says, I usually just get the Blu-ray, but I look at my CD discography and sometimes feel like I'm missing one. Yeah, I mean, it's a live album, right? It's just that these days they release a live album and you get the album and the video. So I like to have them both, and I really like when, and in fact they're doing this most of the time now. They weren't a couple of years ago. A band will release a live album. It's like, okay, here's the CD, and then here's the DVD or Blu-ray. You got to buy them separately. And it's just like, I got to spend twice for this. But now they've gotten smart finally, because I think enough people complain. So now most of the time when a band releases a new live album, it's usually CD, Blu-ray, or CD, DVD package, and that's usually what I get. This way you got both mediums. But yeah, I agree with you. It's like I feel like I got to have both, right? Because you want to watch it and experience it, but you also want to take that live album with you wherever you go. So yeah, I like to have both of them. From Aaron Magram. Hi, Pete. Love your questions and answers show. Thank you, sir. Learned about so many new bands from you. I've heard you mention In the Court of the Crimson King as probably the first major progressive rock album. Was wondering if you ever heard the self-titled Touch album, and if so, what are your thoughts? I believe it predates King Crimson, and it sounds so fully formed and very, very ahead of its time for 1968. Yeah, I mean, there's some pretty proggy stuff on there. And, I believe that was a one and done. I don't think they ever released anything else, to my knowledge. And it's pretty cool. It's kind of Zappa-ish in spots. Some of that early Zappa stuff, which of course predated King Crimson, was fairly progressive, kind of proggy psychedelia. They weren't calling it progressive back then. I still think the first fully realized prog album, like we would know it, is In the Court of the Crimson King. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff on that Touch album that probably easily qualifies. There's even, I think also some of the stuff on that album kind of is not too dissimilar from what Deep Purple were doing on their first 3 albums. That kind of like psychedelic/pop with all the Hammond organ and the intricate passages. Not quite what we call prog, but not that far removed. So yeah, there's a lot of gray areas here in this whole topic of who started prog, what's the first prog album. So the Touch album definitely came out before In the Court of the Crimson King, and it's debatable, right? I still am going to go with King Crimson here. And another part of your question, is the popularity a major factor in considering? It's like, well, the Touch album is kind of obscure. I get it, but I don't know. It's a tough question. You can make a case for it. One more related question. Any shout-outs you want to give to similar albums such as the first High Tide or Lucifer's Friend album? Yeah, both great. Man, those first couple High Tide albums are really good, and I love Lucifer's Friend. Lucifer's Friend are a great band that almost every album sounds completely different from the one before. That first album is kind of awesome hard rock proto-metal, and then they did like a prog album, they did like a psych album, they did like all sorts of stuff. Really, really good band. And High Tide, great band too. From our buddy Arnaud B. What are your 5 favorite producers? Who are your 5 favorite producers, right? Martin Birch. Love the Martin Birch stuff from the late 70s, early, and actually most of the 70s and the early mid-80s. Andy Sneap, one of my current favorite producers. He's also second guitarist in Judas Priest right now. Man, he's a great metal producer. I love the Bob Ezrin stuff. From the Kiss albums, the Alice Cooper albums, and the more recent Deep Purple albums, man, he does a great job. Frederick Nordstrom is also a really, really great, and does mostly extreme metal, but a lot of other metal stuff, power metal, whatnot. He's great. Just so there's some right off the top of my head. Second question from Arnaud: could you name examples of good matches between a band and orchestra? Well, of course, there's the Deep Purple Concerto for Group and Orchestra, which maybe kind of started it all, right? Of more recent times, I thought Yes's Magnification was pretty good. Going back a ways, Rick Wakeman, Journey to the Center of the Earth is quite good, obviously. And, ELP's Pictures at an Exhibition, right? In a live format. Good stuff. Otherwise, I don't really gravitate towards the rock meets orchestra stuff. Done every so often and done well, I don't mind, but it's not something I gravitate towards. From Daniel Enlow: I was curious what your opinion is of some of the more eclectic albums of the 70s, like Working Man's Dead by the Grateful Dead, No Other by Gene Clark, and the band's 1968 album, The Music from the Pink. These albums are close to my heart, and I'm surprised you haven't touched on them yet. Some of this stuff kind of is a little outside my comfort zone, but I do like the Grateful Dead. I'm not a huge Working Man's Dead album fan, though. It's a good album. There are other albums by the Dead that I like better. Blues for Allah, I'm a big fan of. I kind of like that. I like a lot of the Dead's live stuff better than their studio albums. Although some of their studio albums are, of course, Terrapin Station, of course, is great. But I tend to gravitate towards some of the live Dead recordings. But Working Man's Dead, good album. Obviously, a lot of people love it. No Other by Gene Clark, I've never heard before, so I can't comment on that. And I'm not a huge band fan. Although, Music from the Big Pink obviously is legendary for a reason. I've tried with the band. I don't dislike them. There's something about them that just never really clicked with me. Although I appreciate the musicianship. There's some great melodies there. And it's a band that I should love, and I just haven't. I don't dislike them, though. That is a good album. It's a legendary album. But I can't really comment on it much because it's probably not as near and dear to me as it is to you. So. From Miss Astor Dancer: what's up, Miss Astor? I remember you are an ELO fan. That's right. Have you watched the Jeff Lynne's ELO Wembley or Bust from just over a year ago? I have not seen that yet. I actually I own and have watched the Hyde Park Blu-ray numerous times. That's quite good. I actually didn't go out to get the Wembley or Bust because I figure it's probably, what were they, like a year apart that they released those? Maybe a year and a half. And I figured, how much different can it be? I don't know if the set lists are much different. I think, from what I remember hearing about the Wembley or Bust, it's like 30 songs or something like that. I'm not quite sure if the Hyde Park was that long. Miss Astor wants to hear my reaction and opinion. Please watch it and do a review. I'm going to have to pick it up based on your highest recommendations here, because I do love ELO. And I'm not going to get a chance to see them on this tour because the tickets are just way too expensive and a little out of my reach, and I'm thinking, but yeah, I'll definitely pick that up and check it out. Also, another question from Miss Astor. I did a search on your channel, but can I find if you were a fan of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers? Yeah, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers kind of falls a little outside of what we normally do here on this channel and on my website. It's more kind of like, Americana rock and roll type of thing. I don't dislike Tom Petty at all. I think that was a tragic loss, and it's just, he's never been a guy that I would go out and buy any of his albums. I have like a very good 2-disc compilation of greatest hits or highlights or, the essential Tom Petty, whatever you want to call it. And it's just amazing to listen to that and just see just how many popular tunes this guy had. It's just unbelievable. I don't dislike Tom Petty. I've always kind of dug him. Never seen him live. I never liked him enough to want to go see him live or buy any of his albums. But when this compilation came out, I kind of took a look at the track list. I'm like, yeah, this would be good to have. Cause it's got but I remember that when that Damn the Torpedoes album first came out back in, what was that? 81, 82, 80. 79, whenever that was. I remember kind of digging most of those tunes, but I never actually bought any of his albums. From Scott Liaski: Can you do a history of the James Gang? Man, you're reading my mind, Scott. I've actually was thinking about doing that earlier in the week. I'm probably going to do that at some point because I dig the James Gang and I like all the different eras of the James Gang. Hey, it's some great guitar players going in and out of that band, huh? Some great stuff. From Steve Syme, weird question. Can you think of any prog or rock bands who used a drum corps instead of a single drummer? In other words, multiple drummers. I know Fleetwood Mac and Paul Simon tried it for a couple of songs, but did anyone make it a regular part of their sound? Oh yeah, of course. The Allman Brothers Band, for one, forever had two drummers in the band and did it quite well. King Crimson has been doing it for years. In fact, they got 3 drummers right now. Go figure. And man, doing it well. Genesis actually, and I'm going to take a quick drink here. Hold on. Genesis actually, employed 2 drummers live, not on an album, where, because once Phil Collins started singing, he obviously was not playing drums the entire set. So, they brought Chester Thompson on board. Bill Bruford actually also spent some time in Genesis on a tour. So they had they would do part of the set with the dual drummers, which was pretty cool. Hawkwind did a dual drummer thing for many, many years. The Grateful Dead have dabbled in that too, especially live. The Doobie Brothers have also been doing that live a lot in recent years, as well as the Tedeschi Trucks Band. So yeah, there have been numerous bands who have done that, the double or triple drum thing, especially in a live format. From Robert Adamindex. I think former IQ keyboardist Martin Offord is the most underrated keyboardist in British symphonic prog. I'm not going to disagree with you there. What is your take on him and your opinion of his best material? I believe his performance on Aryon's The Human Equation was an unsung hero performance on that album. Also, what do you think about stellar acts such as Green Carnation, Agalock, and Persephone? Okay, let's tackle Martin Offord first. A great keyboard player, a really nice guy who I've had the pleasure of speaking to and meeting in person and seeing live a couple times. A great player. He is a throwback to like the kind of the glory years of prog keyboard textures and things and sounds and all that kind of stuff. And I think any of his playing on those, on so many of those IQ albums are mandatory listening, like Tales from the Lush Attic, The Wake, Subterranea. It's a great album. The Ever album, Seventh House, as well as Dark Matter. And, he recently, I believe, is retired from music, which is a shame. But, man, what a great player. And, like I said, a super nice guy. Also, check out his Jadis. He was in Jadis for a little while, for a bunch of about 3 or 4 albums. The Across the Water album is my favorite Jadis album. It's also got some really good playing from Martin on that. So, good question. As far as what I think of Green Carnation, Agalock, and Persephone, I like all 3. I love that early Green Carnation stuff. I think they're a pretty good band. God, I don't know. What have they done? Are they still together? I don't even know. I haven't heard anything from Green Carnation in ages. Agalock, great band. Kind of hard to describe them, right? Kind of like psychedelic black metal, sort of. I mean, really cool band. And Persephone, really good. In fact, Persephone's most recent album is dynamite. Dynamite stuff. From Fred Hamilton. Love your channel. Thank you, Fred. What is your #1 super anticipated album that let you down the most upon release? Mine is Metallica's Black Album, a fine CD in retrospect, but their polished sound really turned me off at the time. You know what? I actually, looking back on it, I probably would name that as well, but at the time, I was fine with the Black Album. It was different than, obviously, what came before, and I really love the Injustice for All album. But for about a year or 2, I was really into the Black Album. Now I can't even listen to it. But I would say the one, and again, if I really spent more time thinking about this, I probably could come up with a few more. But I think one of the ones that really, really disappointed me because it was just such an about face was Slayer's South of Heaven. That was like the follow-up to Rain and Blood, and Rain and Blood was just like this behemoth. And all us Slayer fans were like, oh, can't wait for the next one, And then South of Heaven came out, and it was kind of like, wait a second, this is nowhere near as intense. History has shown and really warmed me up to the South of Heaven album. But I think at the time, I was kind of like, ugh, this is not what I was waiting for from Slayer. It's like, what happened here? The songs were slower. They weren't as raging and intense and brutal. And it was just kind of like almost like an about face. But like I said, time has proven that it's actually a very, very good album and a strong album. That's a great question, though. I would probably like to really spend more time thinking about that and, maybe doing a whole show on like albums that kind of were anticipated, but then were in a sense of disappointment. From Mark Williams. Great show. Keep up the great work. What is your opinion on Brazen, Abbott, and Sunstorm? You know what? Brazen Abbott is a band that I have heard that name floating around for decades, and to my knowledge, I've never heard Brazen Abbott, so I don't have any opinions on them. Sunstorm, actually, a pretty good band. For those of you not familiar, kind of like a melodic hard rock band with Joe Lynn Turner on vocals. Very, very strong. In fact, I like their most recent one that just came out very, very well. Good band, Sunstorm. From Scala Grimmer Kveldolfsen, man. What do you think about symphonic prog bands from Germany like Novalis, Anyone's Daughter, Hölderlin, Neuschwanstein, Epidaurus, Werewolf, and Schick's Froling? My God. I think most of them were influenced by early Genesis. A few went into pop music at some point in their career, so I'd rather recommend their early albums. Also, I'd like to know, what are your favorite Italian horror movies? I think you mentioned once that you like Italian horror movies. I do. All right, let's go back to your original question. Novalis, I like quite a bit. I'm very familiar with them. Very, very good band. Great guitar work in those Novalis albums. Anyone's Daughter, I think I've heard one album, pretty good. Never dove any deeper. Hölderlin are a very strong band. Neuschwanstein I've never listened to. Epidaurus is phenomenal. I highly recommend Epidaurus to any of you out there. Great German prog with bits of hard rock in it too. Great. Werewolf I've never heard. I have the Schick and Froling. Did they release one album? I got like one CD from them. That's great. Tons of Mellotron. Were some of them influenced by Genesis? Yeah, I would say most of them a little bit. But all the ones that I've heard out of that list, very, very strong. A lot of good stuff coming out of Germany. As far as Italian horror movies, I am a big fan of Dario Argento, Mario Bava, and Lucio Fulci. So I'll run down some of my favorite films from them. So from Argento, I'm a big Suspiria fan. And no, they did not need to remake that movie. Deep Red is great. Tenebrae, however they say that. Love that movie. The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. I love that kind of like noir stuff, like the more mystery, thriller, crime stuff. And Inferno is another great one. From Bava, Black Sabbath. Obviously, A Bay of Blood, Hatchet for a Honeymoon, Black Sunday, Barren Blood, Blood and Black Lace, and Kill Baby Killer. Probably some of my favorite Mario Bava films. From Fulci, Zombie, obviously. City of the Living Dead. I remember when City of the Living Dead first came out, and that was the first Fulci movie I ever saw. I rented that on like VHS. This was back in the late 80s, and I remember watching that late at night with my ex-girlfriend at the time, and I was like, I had never seen anything like that before. That was like horror, gore, monster porn, man. It was just like, it was just shit in that movie I'd never seen before. That creeped the hell out of me. And, you watch these movies now, years later, and you're like, oh, okay, just the amount of gore that was in these movies was just like unsettling. The Beyond is another great one from Fulci, and I like the Don't Torture a Duckling quite a bit too. So some good stuff from those guys. From Jamie Laszlo, what's your top 5 albums of 2018? Well, Jamie, you're going to have to wait and tune in to my top albums of 2018, which is coming up this week. There's going to be 3 parts to this, so I'm going to have special guests on part 1 and part 2. I'm going to go through I'm going to do a top 30 this year. So in the part 1, you're going to see my number 21 through 30. Part 2, you're going to see my 11 through 20. And then part 3, you're going to get my top 10. So that's all coming up this week, so stay tuned. From Dr. Know Who, What, Where. Enjoy your program tremendously. Quick question, kind of personal. Why no New York accent? You know what? I probably don't have as heavy a New York accent as a lot of people from New York. Probably because I've spent more of my time living, upstate from the city. I was born in Brooklyn. I do have a New York accent. There's a lot of people that call me out on my New York accent, but it's probably not as heavy as like someone who lives in the city or Staten Island or, Brooklyn or what have you. So not quite as heavy an accent, but it's probably just simply because since I was like, 4 years old, I've lived upstate, about 70 miles north of New York City. So I've not been in the thick of things down there where everybody, kind of talks like that. So you will hear, there's certain things that I say that sound very New Yorkish, but yeah, it's not exaggerated by any means. From Brian Schlady, my favorite guitar player is Michael Hedges. Too bad he passed on in '97 due to a car accident. His style of guitar playing has been built upon a new wave of guitar players such as Andy McKee, Don Ross, and Billy McLaughlin. Have you ever listened to Hedges or the other 3 gentlemen I have mentioned? I've listened to a little bit of Hedges, not in a long time. I've never heard the other 3 players, so honestly I really can't comment much. I'm assuming those other guys are more acoustic players. I'm not a big acoustic guitar fan. Hedges was amazing though. I will say. what little I have heard of him. From Chris 122176, what is your opinion of Phish? Are they Rock and Roll Hall of Fame worthy? I went back to your webpage and saw that you had a positive review of their MSG 95 release. How much Phish do you have in your collection? What is your percentage of the stuff you own of Phish studio versus live? How many times have you seen them? And if you saw them, do you have an anecdote or two about a night you went and saw them? I've never seen Phish live, so there's that. Are they Rock and Roll Hall of Fame worthy? I don't know. I don't have a big history with Phish. I like everything I've heard by them. I don't own any studio album. I have a couple of live collections. They're a great band. I think I need to go see them once live, and then maybe I can answer your Rock and Roll Hall of Fame worthy. I think that Phish, there's enough of a movement that this band has had for so long to consider. Have any of their albums really sold that well? I don't know. Obviously they're probably the most popular jam band out there and have been for ages. Easily the kind of the heir to the Grateful Dead throne. So I don't know. Are they Rock and Roll Hall of Fame worthy? Yeah, why not, right? Well, depends, I guess. From Indie Catman 777, were you a fan of Tommy Bolin at all in Deep Purple or his solo records Teaser and Private Eyes? I know John Lord said Bolin was already compromised by the time he was in Purple, but a great player nonetheless. Yeah, hell yeah. I will tell you, I think he's a great player. I love the stuff he did on Billy Cobham and Alphonse Mouzon's albums, those early jazz fusion albums. I love the kind of lead stuff he did on that first Moxie album. I love his solo albums. I love the stuff he did in the James Gang. I think, at the time I didn't really think, but I think that the Come Taste the Band album that he was on with Deep Purple is a phenomenal album. Yeah, it's different. Yeah, he was compromised in the throes of drug addiction at the time, but I think that is a great album, a fully realized album that's severely underrated, and I think he was a great player. And that's one of those instances of a dynamite musician whose life just got wrecked by drugs and taken way too soon. Because you really think about what Tommy Bolin could have done if he had lived and gotten clean. It's just it's incredible. A great player and a great question. From Renee Vileja, greetings from Japan. First of all, I haven't found anything about ELO in your channel. Really? Maybe I missed it. I've mentioned ELO lots of times, but if you're looking for like an ELO show, I have not done one of those, no. What about Isoa Tomita? I love the Bermuda Triangle and so much more. Please talk about him. I have no idea who that is. One observation. The music you like, I just like maybe 1/3. What I noticed is that the music you don't like, I don't like it either, and I can say we are 100% synchronized. So why do I like just 33% of the music you like? Well, my album collection is just 1/3 of yours. Great channel. I admire your knowledge. You are a lucky man. Thank you for your show. Yeah, I'm not really sure how you want me to answer your question. We all like different things, so just because you don't like a lot of what I like doesn't really matter. That's that's great. As far as the stuff that we don't like, you don't like either. Hey, cool. From our buddy Anthony Ferrara. What's up, Anthony? The band or artist you've seen the most and how many times? All right, I don't know exact count, but Dream Theater is the band I've seen the most. It's over 20. God, I'm trying to remember last time. I was either 20 or 21 or 22, something like that. And I have tickets to see them coming up next year, so that'll add to that. Yes is second. I think I've seen Yes like 15 times or something like that. For a while there, it's funny because the band I had seen the most up until I got into Dream Theater was Metallica. I've seen Metallica quite a bit back in the 80s and early 90s, but man, once I got into Dream Theater, that was that. Next question from Darren Holder. Hi, Pete. Since you're into heavy 70s rock, have you ever heard of Thunder Mug from London, Ontario? They had a Canadian hit with Africa in 72. U.S. single was on Big Tree from their debut album, Thunder Mug Strikes, their strongest album in my opinion. It was released in the U.S. with cuts from their second LP, Orbit, on Epic in 1973. Original label Axe Records finally reissued their albums on CD recently, so they're easier to grab. And I want to thank Mr. Holder for turning me on to Thunder Mug. I actually saw this question earlier in the week, and I went and ordered both those CDs. I got one of them in. Very, very good. Really good, obscure 70s heavy rock that, if any of you have not checked out Thunder Mug, I highly recommend it. From Ian McLennan, greetings from Scotland. Hi, Pete. Have you heard the female-fronted Canadian power band Unleash the Archers? Brittany Hayes has the most insane vocal range. Their latest album, Apex, is my top 5 metal albums ever. I have heard select tracks from that album, and it is indeed quite good. I have not heard the full album yet, but yeah, that's a pretty talented band. They got a lot of buzz going here in North America. So yeah, check out Unleash the Archers, folks. Definitely good stuff from what I've heard. From Ivo Zanet, always love your segments, Pete. Really appreciate all your hard work. Thank you, sir. I know you mentioned them before, but was wondering if you could do a deep cuts of the Doobies' Captain and Me record. Yeah, I may have to do that because that's a fantastic album. I love those early Doobie Brothers albums, man. Those are just great stuff. Great question. From Mark Williams, hello, Pete. Have you ever checked out Avantasia? Great heavy metal opera, rock operas. Yeah, I like the Avantasia stuff. I think for anybody, it's like who's into like Ayreon. If you want kind of like the more power metal version of what Ayreon does, check out Avantasia. Some really great albums, great guest stars, great vocal performances, good stuff. From All Media Reviews, blogspot.com. Are you familiar with or a fan of Michael Nesmith's solo career? I happen to be married to a Michael Nesmith aficionado and have become somewhat a big fan myself. I find a lot of his solo music very diverse and progressive in a lot of ways, but maybe he could be best described as progressive country rock. The pedal steel guitar playing from Red Rhodes is some of the best, most tasteful playing of the genre. And for good measure, what is your take on the Monkees' favorite albums? Do you like both the movie and the album Head? I've never heard any Michael Nesmith solo stuff. You know, I grew up watching the Monkees TV show. I have a very fun Monkees like greatest hits CD collection. That's as far as I've gotten. It's great stuff. I love some of those Monkees tunes. I honestly can't tell you what my favorite Monkees albums are, and I've never seen the movie Head that they did or listened to any of the stuff from there. So sorry. From Jim B1369, how do you pick what to listen to when you own in excess of 8,000 CDs? Do you have them all in iTunes? Probably not all of them in iTunes, but I have quite a lot of them. How do I pick one? It's just, what I'm in the mood to listen to. Obviously for me it's tough because I have to spend a lot of time also listening to new music that I review either on the website or on here, so it's tough to kind of get through everything. But there are just days where I'm in the mood to listen to, I wake up and I'm in the mood to listen to Genesis, or I'm in the mood to listen to Pantera, or I'm in the mood to listen to Slayer, or Gentle Giant, or the Doobie Brothers, or ELO, or whatever. And it's just moods for me. And a lot of times I just go and I stare at my wall, and I'm like, yeah, I want to hear that. It's really all about that. And, I get to listen to a lot of music. I really enjoy like workouts at the gym every day. I go like around lunchtime, and because it's time for me to check out from work for an hour and everything else and go and do my thing and listen to music. So I generally, on my way driving to the gym, and I have two 160 gig iPods that are loaded with all sorts of stuff. So generally on my way to the gym, I usually have already decided what I want to listen to during my workout that day. So by the time I leave my car in the parking lot to go walk inside, I already got the iPod ready to go, and I know exactly what I'm going to listen to. It's very rare that I actually walk into the gym, take off my jacket, get all my gear on, and then say, okay, what do I want to hear, and start going through the iPod. Very rare. I usually know exactly what I want to hear. So, good question. From Science Talk with Jim Massa. My question is, when you listen to a band or artist for the first time, what are you listening for? Vocals, arrangements, musicianship, and how do you decide if you like the music? Is it something that grabs hold of you at once, or do you need to have repeated listenings before forming an opinion one way or the other? I like stuff that kind of grabs me instantly. So whether it's memorable vocal arrangements and harmonies, whether it's an insanely good guitar playing, or just well-constructed arrangements, something's got to grab me. If I've listened to something twice and there's still nothing that speaks to me, man, it's going to lose my interest pretty damn quick. Because there's just some stuff that gets released that's just like, there's just nothing to grab a hold of you on. The songs aren't memorable, the arrangements aren't memorable, the musicianship isn't memorable. It's got to grab me. It's got to grab me. So I'm more of a music guy, but I love, good vocals are really good too. Lyrics don't really, I could care less about lyrics, to be honest with you. But it's all about the musicianship, and it's all about the melodies and the arrangements, and, the vocals have to be decent, because bad vocals just are not going to cut it. From Marhill77, hey Pete, I know you're a big Michael Schenker fan. What is your favorite Schenker solo while he was in UFO, MSG, and the Scorpions? Man, what a great question. All right, so from UFO days, man, it's kind of a toss-up between Rock Bottom or Pack It Up and Go from the Obsession album. I love both of those. As far as extended solo, Rock Bottom's got to get my pick there, but as far as like collection of red hot solos in one song, I think Pack It Up and Go has got it. From MSG, I'm going to go with Attack of the Mad X, man. It's a lot of great MSG solos, but man, that That solo is just killer. And from the Scorpions, I'm going to go with the very first album, Lonesome Crow, I'm Going Mad. I think it's got some blistering solos from Mr. Schenker, who was like, what, 15 years old at the time or something like that? Great question. From William Langan, have you heard of a band from the Philippines called Eternal Now? I have not. I will check into them. From Richard Strickler, any thoughts on the Eagles? Favorite songs, deep cuts, top 10 songs, etc. I would probably have to do a whole show on that. I like the Eagles. I've always been a big fan. Eagles was probably the first bands that I really started following and diving into their catalog back in, it was like, before I started getting into like heavier music, I was into like the Eagles and Steve Miller Band and ELO, that sort of thing. Before I was into Kiss at the time, also about Paul McCartney Wings as well. I like the Eagles. I love the Hotel California album. I love that One of These Nights is one of my favorite albums, one of my favorite tunes. Yeah, I probably could do like a top 10 song list from the Eagles. I think that'd be kind of cool. From Gage, great question and answer. Are you a fan of Elvis Costello? I wouldn't say I'm a big fan. I have an Elvis Costello compilation that's pretty good. Can't say I've listened to it in years. Not really my cup of tea. I don't dislike Elvis Costello, but it's not really my thing. From George Lammy, hey Pete, I have heard you talk about in passing a theoretical Canadian top 5, and neither time did you mention Druckfarben as a contender. You simply have to like their stuff. So just not enough material out yet for you to put them in there? Well, nothing against Druckfarben. I've heard some of their stuff, decent enough. But, when you're up against Rush and Triumph and Mac Webster and Saga and Devin Townsend and April Wine and BTO, they're going to get lost in the shuffle, my friend. So nothing against Druckfarben. From NP, asking about metal this week. What are your thoughts of the early 90s metal scene, especially Earache Records with bands like Entombed, Cathedral, Pitch Shifter, At the Gates, Brutal Truth, and Godflesh? He's got a bunch of questions here, so let me tackle each one at a time. That's all great stuff. I was never a huge Entombed fan. For some reason, they just never really did it for me. But man, Cathedral, hell yeah. At the Gates, those first 2 At the Gates albums, come on. Godflesh never really did it for me. I've never listened to Pitch Shifter or Brutal Truth, so I can't comment on them. But out of those, Cathedral, definitely. I'm a big Doom fan, in case you haven't noticed. Also, are you familiar with Black Mark Records, who started around the same time, specifically Edge of Sanity? I've never heard you mention the Crimson album by them, which is a prog metal hybrid. I think you would love. One song, 40 minutes. Yeah, I love Edge of Sanity. In fact, I talked about Edge of Sanity, I think, on last week's question and answer show. I mentioned them to another person that was asking for recommendations. I love Dan Swino on Edge of Sanity. That Crimson album is awesome. That's very much kind of like progressive death metal along the lines of Opeth. They did a follow-up to that too, which is pretty damn good. Great death metal band with some progressive elements. I love Edge of Sanity. I'm a big Dan Swino fan, so good stuff. Another question, what are your thoughts on Dan Swano's further solo stuff like Nightingale and Pandemonium? Nightingale is a terrific band. They're kind of like a melodic rock / prog band. Very, very good stuff with great vocal melodies and harmonies and great instrumentation. Very underrated band. I have those Pandemonium albums. Man, those are out there. I went through a period where I was just buying everything I could that Dan Swano had anything to do with. And I got to tell you, those Pandemonium albums, they're pretty bizarre. There's some good stuff on there, but I would not recommend them to the weak of heart, let me tell you. Lastly, are you familiar with November's Doom? I became aware of them through Dan Swano doing producing, mixing for them, and consider Bled White a modern metal classic. Yeah, that's a great band. November's Doom are very, very good. Kind of like a melancholy, melodic death / doom metal band. Really, really good. They have a string of great albums. They've been around forever, and they've just got so many really, really strong albums. I highly recommend November's Doom. From the Constant Reader, hi Pete, we've been enjoying your content. I have yet another question for you. I was wondering if you were into Jeff Buckley at all, and if so, what your thoughts are on him. Great musician who was sadly taken from us way too soon. Never listened to Jeff Buckley. Sorry, I know a lot of people are into him. I think I went and experimented with a couple tunes, and it just really wasn't my cup of tea. But I know a lot of people like him, so don't go by me. From MFTE Para, Mef to Para. Got to get your thoughts on the movie Almost Famous. Certainly you've seen it, and if you haven't, it's the best rock movie I've ever seen, hands down. I love Almost Famous. Hold on. A lot of talking here. Almost Famous is great. That is probably one of the quintessential rock and roll movies of all time. I've seen it numerous times, and it never gets old. And yeah, I dig it quite a bit. It's certainly a great depiction of like 70s and early 80s kind of rock and roll, specifically the 70s, like what was kind of going on behind the scenes, and really, really good stuff. From Raymond Kaiser, Pete, what do you think of ex-Boston guitarist Barry Goudreau's material? Excuse me, released as Orion the Hunter. I love the Orion the Hunter album a lot. I saw Orion the Hunter live, opening for Aerosmith back in the day. That was a very memorable show, and yeah, I dig that album a lot. I just recently got it on CD because I had it on LP back in the day, never replaced it, and loving it all over again. I also recommend too, if you like Barry Goudreau, check out the RTZ albums. There's 2 of those. Those are pretty strong too. It's got Brad Delp on vocals, which is great. From Scott McGregor. Pete, you mentioned before that you like Bowie a little bit. Who is your favorite Bowie guitarist? Ronson gets the most props, but Earl Slick I thought was a monster, especially on Station to Station. Ballou and Frampton, I believe Frampton even played on the Glass Spider tour. Your thoughts, please. And also, have you ever heard the Celtic symphonic prog band Iona? Yes, they have tin whistles and pipes, but they have some blistering in-your-face guitar. Check them out. Yeah, I've listened to Iona. I've heard quite a few of their albums. I think I even have a couple of them. They're a very, very good band. She's a great singer, and the guitar playing is just really, really good. Very, very good, unique band. As far as Bowie guitar players, yeah, I mean, I love Ronson, but man, Earl Slick, he is definitely a monster player. He lives around here, actually. He's from my neck of the woods. And yeah, that Station to Station stuff is great. Ballou obviously did some great stuff with him as well. My favorite guitar player is Ronson, but I think probably Earl Slick is the most talented of all of them. But, Ballou definitely is up there as well. He's had some great guitar players over the years. Really has. Another one from Raymond Kaiser. What do you think of the 3 albums by Gamma, Ronnie Montrose's band? That was great, especially those first 2. Love those first 2 Gamma albums. The third one's good, not quite as strong as the first 2, but yeah, great stuff. Great kind of like, God, how do you even describe the Gamma stuff? It's just good melodic hard rock, man. Really good stuff. A great guitar playing. From Science Talk with Jim Massa again. What are your thoughts on Pat Benatar? I think she is a kick-ass rocker with a really superb voice. Absolutely. In fact, I believe we have another question coming up about Pat. I love most of the Pat Benatar stuff. I grew up with Pat Benatar, so I really dig her a lot. She should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. From Niels B. Husker Du, are you into them and Bob Mould? No, I am not. Never listened to Husker Du or Bob Mould. Sorry. From the Moogle Master, what do you think of free jazz and acid jazz? I always had an interest in these genres. I mean, I've heard lots of free jazz by a lot of different artists over the years. You got to be in the mood to listen to that stuff, but there's some crazy shit out there that's really cool. I first started listening to free jazz as I was getting into Ornette Coleman and some of those crazy albums he released. But yeah, I don't have an issue with free jazz. Got to be in the mood for noisy stuff though. Totally got to be in the mood for that. From Jimmy Carabineris, how a couple of history of for you. Okay, in other words, how about a history of on Renaissance and Pat Benatar? I've actually been thinking about possibly doing a history of on Renaissance, possibly Pat Benatar. I think Renaissance would be a little more fun, to be honest with you, but we'll see. From Russell Gentili, thanks for spending the time to answer my questions. What are your thoughts on Tony Macalpine? I remember listening to his Maximum Security album in the late 80s and it took me on a journey. The songs Tears for Sahara and Thousands of Thousands, I think Sacred Wonder, were extremely memorable. A great player. And I'm hoping he's okay, man, because I know he's been ill for a while. Great guy. Great player. I got to meet him also briefly back a number of years ago. I love the stuff. His solo albums are great. Those early ones are obviously fantastic. Check out his work with Planet X with Derek Sherinian. How about the Cab Band? With Brian Auger and Bunny Brunell. That's fantastic jazz fusion stuff. As far as some of the power metal stuff he did, how about Ring of Fire with Mark Bowles on vocals? Those are really strong albums, and the Project Driver album was great. But yeah, Tony's a great player. Also enjoyed watching him with Steve Vai. Watching those 2 guys side by side. Fantastic. From Orlando Castillo. Thank you, Pete, for reading my question regarding Tool and 9 Inch Nails. I've also been loving your top 10 list, which leads to this question. How about a top 10 and or history of the Motor City Madman, Ted Nugent? Possibly. I might want to do that. I think it'd be fun to do a top 10 songs of Nugent. From Charlie Haynes, what's your top 10 concerts you've attended? I'm going to do, I think, a separate show on that rather than get into it here. And Charlie lists a whole bunch of ones here that he's been to, which are pretty cool. Very jealous of a lot of those. But yeah, I'm going to do a top 10 shows, I think. I think I've dabbled. I've answered some questions in past shows about some of my favorite shows, but I think a top 10 would be kind of fun. From Wizardo Foz, Keep up the amazing videos. Question, you mentioned groups that are overrated and that you dislike, but no prog there. So are there any famous prog groups or soloists in prog music that you dislike? And if so, who are they and why do you dislike them? Yeah, I wouldn't say I dislike any of these bands. I'll mention two of them. And again, I don't dislike them. They just don't do it for me. And I know a lot of people love them. And I've mentioned these guys before because everybody keeps asking me, why don't you ever talk about Magma? Why don't you ever talk about Magma? Magma just doesn't do it for me. I've tried. I went and bought like their entire discography years and years ago. And I just kept trying to get into them, man, those vocals just don't do anything for me. And it's just like, it's like this frenetic noise. I mean, musically, I like a lot of the stuff they do, but I just can't get past that. So Magma's one of them. RPWL is another more kind of recent band that, again, I don't dislike, but man, their music just doesn't really do a lot for me. And I know a lot of people love them. So there's two of them for you. From David Ridgway, good video. Deep Purple is my favorite band. Also, tips of the hat to me, there are 4 different bands. I love each and every one. Rod Evans was a psychedelic pop band. I really like the extended versions of pop songs. Ian Gillan was magnificence incarnate. The Coverdale Hughes was second in my mind and heart. Tommy Bolin was killer, but not right for Purple. Please share your thoughts on this one. And what do you think of Tommy's solo stuff? I found him from Purple and dug him. Wild Dogs and Post Toasty being favorites. I think I kind of already answered that, David, in the question before. Yeah, I love Tommy Bolin. I love the Come Taste the Band album, and I love his solo stuff. I'm a big fan. From Lizard King Vital. Love your channel. It's entertaining and informative, and your knowledge is amazing. Thank you. I have 2 questions for you. What are your thoughts on Joy Division? Never listened to them. What are your top 5 AC/DC studio albums? Back in Black, Let There Be Rock, Highway to Hell, High Voltage, for those about to rock, with honorable mentions, 2 other favorites, Powerage and The Razor's Edge. Another question from Marhill77. Pete, Manfred Mann's Earth Band rarely gets a mention. Talk about early prog. Every 70s album they put out is awesome, and right up through his Somewhere in Africa release in '83. Are you a fan? Hell yeah, I am. I love Roaring Silence, obviously, is a great album. Solar Fire is great. Nightingales and Bombers, I love. Messin is a really, really good album. The Good Earth is great. Glorified, Magnified. I love all those albums. I'm a big fan of Manfred Mann's Earth Band. From Dude Why. Pete, obviously you like McCartney and Wings. What do you think of the other 3 Beatles solo work? Yeah, hit or miss. I mean, if you as far as like you put together a compilation and there's some great stuff on there, the only other Beatles solo albums I own is Harrison's All Things Must Pass, which is obviously a great album. I don't own any Ringo Starr solo stuff other than a compilation. I don't own any of the John Lennon stuff other than a compilation. And I'm less of a fan of the Lennon stuff, crazy enough. I've never been a huge John Lennon fan, but I do like a bunch of his songs. I think McCartney stuff just blows away the rest of the 3 of them. But I think if I had to listen to the Harrison stuff, there's a lot of good material there. So. From Eliphas Desney, what's your favorite period from the Scorpions? Uli John Roth, man. Fly to the Rainbow, Virgin Killer, In Trance, Taken by Force, Tokyo Tapes. You can't beat that stuff. I love the Lonesome Crow album. I love those. The first, Love Drive, Animal Magnetism, Blackout, Love at First Sting. I like those Scorpions albums from the Jabs era. Don't really care too much for anything after that. But man, the Uli John Roth era stuff, just untouchable in my opinion. From King Pazuzu, I have a question for you. Part 2. First is out of 3 dual guitar bands, Maiden, Priest, and Merciful Fate. What is your opinion on which is better? King likes Sherman Denner, very underrated. Second question, what do you think of the last 2 solo albums from Bruce Dickinson? Accent of Birth, Chemical Wedding with Adrian Smith. When fantastic. Then they got back with Maiden, and I don't think the newer Maiden is as good as those 2 solo albums. Thanks, and I enjoy your channel. Probably technically speaking, I think Sherman and Denner are probably better than the other two teams. But man, I just think that when you look at like the catalog and the years of doing great stuff together, I think it's kind of hard to beat Tipton and KK for my money. But man, I tell you, Maiden's duo there, or now trio, not too far behind. I'm going to give my nod to the guys from Priest. I think that the Merciful Fate dudes are probably the most talented out of the 3 that we're talking about here, but I'm going to go with the dudes from Priest. As far as Dickinson's solo albums, those are great. I mean, I'm not going to argue with you there, but I will disagree. I think all the stuff that they've released since they got back with Bruce and Adrian, I've loved. I love all those albums. Great stuff. From Bry, favorite prog vocalist? Gabriel. Peter Gabriel, John Anderson, Ian Anderson, John Wetton, Greg Lake, Annie Haslam, off the top of my head. From Bondalong, your thoughts on Patrick Moraz's solo discography. One of my Desert Isle favorites is The Story of I. I have not heard any of Patrick Moraz's solo albums, so I can't comment there. From James Ferrante, have you ever heard the 70s Southern hard rock band White Witch that formed in Tampa, Florida in '71? They put out 3 albums on the Capricorn label that also had the Allman Brothers Marshall Tucker. Although not easily defined, they've been described as progressive and psychedelic rock and also Southern boogie. They were the American Southern Black Sabbath. They're noted for the songs We All Ride High, Moneybags, and Class of 2000. I've got their self-titled album on CD. That's pretty damn good. Yeah, kind of hard to classify. They really weren't Southern rock, right? They kind of really didn't fit into that category, the rest of the Capricorn bands, but pretty damn cool. You know, good hard rock band. From Spider Rocks, great show, Pete. I'd like your opinion on Cheap Trick, more specifically Robin Zander's vocals. I think he is just amazing. I've seen him 12 times over the years since they've opened for everyone, and it's just, he nails it every time. He's one of the very few vocalists from the classic rock era that still sounds the same as he always did. Your thoughts? I've always liked Cheap Trick. I've been a big fan since like the late 70s, and I dig, especially a lot of their earlier material. I haven't listened to a ton of their albums in recent years. I've heard a couple of them, and I've seen them live numerous times in the last like 5-8 years, and they still bring it live. You know, Robin, I think he's lost a little bit on the vocals, but he still sounds pretty damn good for an older dude. And got to commend him for that. But I love the energy that they still have live. I mean, the band really still is up there playing as like they were, you know, in their 20s and 30s, which is great. And I think they really connect with the crowd. So a lot of props for Cheap Trick. And I went to their hard rock and roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony in Brooklyn when they got inducted, and they finished the evening. They were the last band to get inducted and the last band that played, and I thought they did a great job. It was pretty cool. From Clive Walker, you have a time machine, but can only attend 3 concerts in history. Mine would be Jimi Hendrix at Monterey, ELP Brain Salad Surgery Tour with the Quad set up, and Genesis the Lamb Tour. What would yours be? Great show as always. I'm gonna point out 3 specific ones. I think that I would have loved to have been at Woodstock the last day to see Jimi Hendrix. Okay, 1969. I would have loved to have been at Wembley Stadium in '86 to see that famous Queen show. Okay, which obviously is on video and album. I think that would have been awesome. And I would have loved to have been at Earl's Court in 1975 to see that massive Zeppelin show. There you have it. From Matthew Walker, what is your opinion on these British rock bands, Status Quo and Magnum? 2 bands that have never really made it in the States. I know you have the famous Status Quo live album, but have you heard of Magnum? Of course. If not, I think you should check them out. What albums by Status Quo you're into? I do love the live album, by the way. I love the Pile Driver album. I love Quo, the Blue For You album, and the On the Level album. I think those are my favorite Status Quo albums. As far as Magnum, I love Magnum, man. On a Storyteller's Night is a great album. Kingdom of Madness is one of my favorite Magnum albums. I love the Chasing the Dragon album. Brand New Morning, one of their later ones, is really good, and the 11th Hour is excellent. But man, you can't go wrong with any Magnum album. Another one of those bands that I don't think has ever released a bad album. They're all really, really good. From Bruce Craig, thanks for answering my question on Fish. I went to see him live again the other night here in London. New material for upcoming album sounds really good. Been listening to a lot of Peter Hamill and Van de Graaff Generator. Do you like them? Also, where would you recommend to start if new to Gentle Giant? Yes, I like Van de Graaff Generator, and I like Peter Hamill's, like especially early solo stuff. So great stuff. As far as where to start with Gentle Giant, I'm going to give you a couple albums here. Probably my favorites. In a Glass House, 3 Friends, Octopus, and Freehand. Power and the Glory you could probably throw in there too. But I would start with any one of those. You know, maybe for more, you know, maybe if to kind of get your feet wet in Gentle Giant, get the In a Glass House or Freehand albums first. And then go 3 Friends and Octopus and Power and the Glory. I think that's probably your best bet, but that's where I would start. From Fraser Dawson, thank you for answering my question. Okay, I got more for you. Have you heard Lucifer's Friends, Wild Turkey, and Hellstar? Also, how about Captain Beyond? Okay, first of all, I love Captain Beyond. I think I already talked about that in a previous show. Great band. I love their first album. It's classic. Second album is very good. And then their third album, after Rod Evans left, I think is also very strong. Lucifer's Friend, I think I just talked about them a couple minutes ago. Love them. Great band. All their albums are really different and really great. Wild Turkey. I love Wild Turkey. Man, those 2 Wild Turkeys are great. That's Glenn Cornick's band after he left Jethro Tull. Really, really underrated, like kind of progressive hard rock stuff. Love that. More recent to Hellstar. Hellstar is a very, very strong power metal band. Good vocals, kind of thrashy, power metal / thrash. Did I cover everything here? I think so. From Alora Loves Darkness. Thank you, Pete, for your wonderful channel and your honest opinions. I'm so glad that I found out about you. Very cool. A few questions. How about Kerry Livgren's Protocol? I like Protocol. I actually had the opportunity to see Protocol live at Nearfest and actually interview the entire band with Kerry Livgren and spend a couple hours with them. Great bunch of guys. Very, very cool. Nocturnus, death metal band. I like Nocturnus a lot. I think the Thresholds album and The Key are very, very good. Very cool, kind of like spacey, progressive death metal. What is your favorite Pat Benatar songs or albums? As far as songs go, I love Invincible. I'm just such a huge fan of that. Hell is for Children is a great tune. Promises in the Dark I like quite a bit. Heartbreaker, obviously. Love is a Battlefield. You Better Run. All great. I love Pat Benatar. She's very, very underrated. From Nech Epsos Moon. Thanks for the reply. I watched like 10 to 20 of your videos and didn't hear you mention Hawkwind. They deserve a full show. Man, I've mentioned Hawkwind so many times because I keep talking about Hawkwind because so many people keep asking about him. I guess what everybody's trying to tell me is I need to do like a top 10 songs of Hawkwind or a history of show. So I guess I'm going to have to just break down and do that because, man, you guys have beat me over the heads with this. From Scott Scotter. Have you ever seen Frank Zappa live? I was so close to going until my dad read the song list from live from New York. That's a little, yeah, I totally get that. No, I never got to see Frank Zappa live. I wish. I've seen Zappa play Zappa numerous times. That's as close as I'm going to get, I guess. This next viewer, I don't know what your name here is, but your favorite David Bowie era. How about Hunky Dory through the Young Americans? So that's what, 71 through 75. That's my favorite era, but I like all David Bowie stuff. But that's probably the stuff that I'm closest to. Lawrence Terwilliger. Hi, Pete. Do you think producers of albums help or overproduce? Also, most bands don't produce their own albums by themselves. Maybe the record companies think they need help. What do you think? There's instances of overproducing and then letting the band kind of do their own thing, but helping them put everything together. I think, Mutt Lange obviously was very able to take a band and make them sound larger than life, but that he had so much input into kind of song structure and all that kind of stuff. So that maybe is on the end of overproducing. But in a lot of instances that worked, right? You look at some of the AC/DC stuff and Def Leppard, that was Mutt really taking those bands and really making something huge out of them. And Bob Ezrin too was guilty of doing that, whether you like it or not. But I think like Martin Birch, I mentioned Martin earlier, I think Martin Birch really kind of just took what the band had and just made them sound great. They didn't add all this extra stuff, they didn't do like the Phil Spector thing. So it depends on what you like to hear, right? Some people like that overproduced lush stuff. Others want to just hear the band sounding as raw and live as possible. So it depends on what you like. From Clive Walker, do you think that Dream Theater is slightly gone of the boil? That's a cool way of putting it. The last album I bought was Systematic Chaos. Well, you missed some good stuff. I find that Dream Theater have some of the best musos around, but they tend to over-elaborate the music to one overcooked song after another. The music could be too busy. Your thoughts? I probably need to do a rant on this, but I think Dream Theater gets like more people fired up about their music than any other band. There's so much like Dream Theater hate out there. You get people who are totally not into that style of music or the band at all, but they feel like they have to go onto every forum that's talking about Dream Theater and bash the band and tell why they hate them. If you don't like them, then don't talk about them and don't try to spew your negativity to people who like them. But on the other hand, you've got people who love Dream Theater, but they analyze every note of every song to death. I've never seen a fan base that's more critical of the band they love than Dream Theater fans. In my opinion, okay? I've been following Dream Theater since basically the very beginning. I've seen them live more than any other band. I've written a lot about Dream Theater. I'm a big fan. The problem with a band like Dream Theater is that they've got so much material. It's like, I think they've had a hard time in recent years trying to come up with stuff that's still really truly original and inspiring to listen to. So there have been hints that they've been kind of retreading similar musical passages and ideas on recent albums, but they still are able to put together, for me, music that's very exciting to listen to. It's musically challenging, there's great melodies, and that's what I look for. So for me, I like Dream Theater, I like basically all their eras. The only stinker in their catalog for me is The Astonishing, which they put out, a year or two ago. That big overblown concept record, which I tried, and I feel really bad that I didn't like it, but I just didn't. I went to see him live on that tour, and it was just boring. And I was like, oh my God. And I never thought I would say that about Dream Theater. But I have high hopes for the new album, so we'll see. If you've stopped listening to him years ago, but you were always a fan, you need to, the band has not ended since Mike Portnoy left. They're still putting out really good music, despite what some people say. From Eric Berg, love the channel. I'm 23, but can't stand the music that most people my age listen to. I can't stand to hear that stuff either. Been a metalhead for years, but really get into classic prog and early metal lately. Just wondering, what are some of your favorite one-and-done bands from the 60s and 70s? Groups who only ever put out one studio album or who recorded a second album that wasn't released until 10 plus years later. Some of my favorites include T2, Jerusalem, Weed, Boulder Dam, and Ice Cross. Any thoughts on those, and if you're familiar with them? Yeah, I love the T2 album. I love Jerusalem. Jerusalem has gotten back together in recent years, although in a really watered down version. And I've released a couple albums, but it's nothing like that first Jerusalem album. Weed, I've never heard. Boulder Dam or Ice Cross, I've never heard any of those. That probably would be a good topic for another show. So I really don't have any. I'm sure there's tons of them out there. I could probably go and find. But that's a great question. I'm going to give that some thought. From James Ferrante, seeing your Scorpion shirt, the question came to mind, not just their great music, but the Scorpions were notorious for their very controversial album covers, such as the band Virgin Killer cover Love Drive, Animal Magnetism, and the Best Of, with a scorpion clinging to a woman's hip. Another group big in the 70s, also known for the same, was the Ohio Players. My question is, what were your favorite and or least favorite album covers from either of these bands? I can't comment on the Ohio Players because I don't have any of their albums. I've never heard any of their albums other than like greatest hits collections and stuff. But as far as the Scorpions, my favorite album covers are Blackout. That's just so cool. I like the In Trance album. That's kind of cool. Tokyo Tapes is very cool, and the Fly to the Rainbow album cover. My least favorite, just because they're kind of like, it's like they're just kind of meant to shock, and they're kind of silly. The Love at First Sting, with the gum on the boob thing, that's just kind of silly. The Love Drive, actually no, Love Drive is what I'm talking about. That's the one. The Love at First Sting, that's kind of like, whatever. Virgin Killer, either or. Now the one that was banned with the naked little girl with the glass, that's just kind of tasteless. And then the replacement, which is just the guys on the cover looking all ugly and shit, it's like, whatever. And I think that Crazy World album cover is just kind of lame. So not some great ones there. From Hamias, what do you think are the most underrated Blue Oyster Cult songs? For me, they are Seven Screaming Disbusters, Stairway to the Stars, and Soul Survivor. All right, how about Black Blade, Subhuman, Harvester of Eyes, Nosferatu, and Perfect Water? Those are some underrated. From Adam Lamara, what was the worst concert you have ever been to? Easy, Rat and Poison, Mid-Hudson Civic Center, Poughkeepsie, New York, 1987. I don't like Poison, but I went, because I wanted to see Rat. Poison I thought were terrible. Rat were all drunk and drugged out and awful, so no good. From Lonnie V, yo Pete, Starcastle, great band. First 3 albums are fantastic. I agree. Terry Luttrell, great singer. But wrote the most inane lyrics ever. Their 4th album, Reel to Reel, went in a commercial rock direction. Sucked, but the first song on it, Half a Mind to Leave You, is actually very good melodic. There's a great live disc on them too. Your thoughts? I love Starcastle. Yeah, those first 3 albums are really good. I had the pleasure of seeing Starcastle, God, how many years ago was that? I don't remember. Very, very cool band. Great stuff. Ryan B, who do you think is a better guitar player, Michael Schenker or Uli John Roth? I hate that question. I think technically Uli is a better player, and I love Uli to death, but my favorite is Schenker, just because. So Uli, slightly better guitar player. Schenker is my guy, but I love them both. Great question, though. From Andrew G. Dick, can you tell my voice is cracking? I'm glad we're at the last question. Hi, Pete. Love your videos. They have resulted in me listening to many of your recommendations and building playlists on my iTunes of all your lists, and have been buying a few as well. Only got 7,500 to catch up with you. I just saw Paul McCartney in concert here in Glasgow at the Hydro Arena. It was awesome. Been to many gigs this year, and this tops them all. It got me thinking, and my question is, can you think of anyone alive who has a better songbook of greatest hits than McCartney? Probably not, but I think the only one who comes close is Elton John. And yeah, I think Elton's probably close, but McCartney's probably right up, probably number 1. Elton's close. I think Billy Joel's up there too. We mentioned Tom Petty before. Man, he's up there as well. Maybe Rod Stewart too. But yeah, McCartney's up there. I think Elton's the guy who challenges him the most, or the closest. You know, we're not going to put the Stones in there because the Stones are a band. You're kind of talking about a solo artist. So, yeah, McCartney and Elton. That's it. So, guys, that's it. An hour and 20 minutes. This is on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're on the mighty YouTube each and every week. Stay tuned for more top 10 songs, deep cuts on classic albums, rants, history ofs, new product reviews, and a question and answer show coming up next week. So you know the drill. You got more questions, put them in the comments and feedback here. I'll take those and answer them next week. See you guys.